Yeah. Hi, and welcome to learntoplaymusic.com, to the music space. My name's Gary, and today I'm here with Dave Innocente.
Hi, everyone.
Acclaimed Adelaide guitarist. So don't forget your Q&A apps, put on your headphones, and let's get into it. So today we're going to hopefully interact, inspire, and get you all to ask some questions during the show and on the blog. So Dave, what made you decide to specialise in jazz, or what turned you onto jazz in the first place?
I got an album in my teens from my cousin, a Herb Ellis album, which really sounded great to me. I really loved the music. It was jazz, and he had an ensemble with Ray Brown and some really famous jazz players, and I just really loved it and wanted to learn how to play that style of music. So I started to copy what I could hear and transcribe some of the stuff, work it out, and it really turned me onto other albums.
Basically just ripped it off. You listened to it and worked out what he was doing, and, as opposed to having someone show you or getting
I was a lot
I
was self-taught a lot of the time, and so I listened a lot to records and worked out the lines orally by ear, and that really sort of led me down the path of playing.
And you'd already been playing for a while before you heard that?
Yeah, I reckon I was 18 or 19. I'd been playing for 5 years, but mainly rock music, pop music, that sort of thing.
Status Quo.
Yeah. That was literally one of the first bands I got into was Status Quo.
Yeah.
And then once I started to move, I suppose, from more progressive music, I guess, progressive rock, and then I got that jazz album, and then I started listening to pure jazz, what you'd call swing jazz, I guess. And then that sort of led me down the path of playing modern jazz as well.
Cool. And then that obviously you started doing some gigs, and then eventually you became a professional musician. So is your life as a professional musician? Tell us a bit more about it. What are you doing? What have you done?
Well, I suppose I started playing more full-time after I finished studying at university. I went to university to study jazz, did a Bachelor of Music, and there I met a lot of people, and you interact a lot and network with them, and they call you for work, and you just start to work from there. The gigs don't appear, but they have work. You find your own work, you start your own bands, that sort of thing. So people you meet help you with your professional life, like meeting you. Yeah. And
I gave you your big break, didn't I?
You did. It was my agent, Gary. So yeah, that's kind of the way it went for me. It all started in terms of working as a musician from studying. Yeah. And at university, like I said, met lots of people. Obviously, they liked what I was doing. Yeah. And
well, because you're a great player, mate.
Thanks very much.
So they should like it. And obviously, that's taken you on to play with some big names. John Farnham being one of them?
Well, yeah, that gig came about through a recommendation through a friend of mine who was interstate, and there was a a gig called The Main Event
Yeah.
with Olivia Newton-John and some other people who needed another guitar player with the orchestra. It was actually with like a 60, 70-piece orchestra. It was huge at the entertainment centre, and they needed another guitar player. I got called to do that, and we rehearsed and did about 10 or 11 nights in a row. It was really good fun, really amazing.
Yeah, I bet. And then and obviously you partied with John every night.
We did one night. I can tell some stories there, but they're a bit.
Apparently, he likes a bit of a party. So.
He does. Yeah. He likes a drink.
Yeah, that's cool. So, is there any other tours or artists that you've played with of note, or
in terms of, I've done lots of musicals. Some musicals that have come through town. Same sort of deal. I got recommended by friends interstate. The musicals obviously get organised very early before they get played in the city that you're in, and sometimes those musicals pick up musicians at the place.
Yeah.
Instead of touring with a band, they pick one up in the city that they're in, and that happened with Fame. I did Fame about 15 years ago.
Yeah,
that was good fun. That was at the Festival Theatre.
So they're reading gigs, aren't they, primarily?
They're reading gigs.
Yeah.
You get the music ahead of time, so you can kind of be a little prepared for what sounds you need to.
So learning how to read just gives you another option to get work as
it does.
musician.
Reading is an important aspect of doing gigs like that, and they're very they're good gigs to do. They're high pressure, but they're a lot of fun once you have got into the rehearsals and the stuff is internalised and you really know it. It becomes a lot of fun.
And they tend to pay well too, which is always a
Now they pay regularly.
nice
You get paid for rehearsals, which is unusual.
Yes, pay regularly. What's that?
I did Dusty as well, the musical at the Festival Theatre as well.
Cool.
And you get some amateur ones along the way. You and I did.
Yeah,
Jesus
well,
Christ
all of a sudden you
Superstar.
got to work with an amateur, and
that was Gary here.
yeah.
Well, that was
So
a
we
lot
did
of fun.
Jesus Christ, that was great fun.
It's a lot of fun.
It's
It's a
great fun.
really fun musical to play for guitar.
Dave played electric guitar and I played acoustic.
That's
so there
right.
you go. That was good fun. And we played in Spanky very much together for
Cover
years,
band, yeah, cover bands
back
are
in the olden days.
great way to get
Good
one.
old days.
And we worked together in Malaysia for about 3 to 4 months together in a little trio.
Yeah, I can't even remember what we were called, but
There and Back.
oh god,
The worst rock name
what a
in
great
history.
name! Yeah, that'll live forever.
I take credit for that.
But we had a lot of fun. I do.
We did have a
remember
lot
that.
of fun.
So your band, you have a few projects at the moment. The main one, I believe, being a fusion, jazz fusion band, for one of the better name, called Dirt.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Dirt started. I started writing and got into fusion, which is kind of a mixture of jazz and rock, through people like Alan Holdsworth, bands called Tribal Tech, and I started to really love that music because it combined the early love I had for sort of hard rock sounds with improvisation and jazz. And I started Dirt because I started writing that music a lot, and I got together with the drummer I went to university with, and we started getting together, just him and I.
And who was that? Huh?
Sorry?
Who was that?
Tom Mann.
Okay. Oh, of course. Yes.
And Tom and I started jamming the stuff. I sort of showed it to him, and he learnt it, and we played it, and it sounded great. We wanted to continue with that, and we found a bass player, Ben Fuller, who I also went to university with, and I started a trio, and we called it Dirt, mainly because the music on, there we go, the CD, you can find that on iTunes. And I found some work for the band, and we introduced Chris Saul later on saxophone, just to broaden the sound a little. In fact, we were asked by the ABC to record, and they said, "Can you add a different element to the band?" And I got Chris in, who's a great musician,
Yes, he is.
beautiful guy, and that's how that band essentially evolved. And we recorded that CD, and we still play intermittently here and there. When I can find a drummer, because Tom now has moved to Melbourne. I've had other drummers. Ben Todd was one of the guys who we used for that band. So the style of that, like I said, is very much a mix of rock and jazz.
Yeah. And you've got another CD here. I noticed the Hammond Eggs trio.
Sort of just out of finishing university.
Hammond Eggs trio. Yeah. Featuring Paul White.
Paul, yes, Paul
Andrew
White
Bignell,
on.
was it? Is it
Andrew Bignell
Yeah.
was
On drums?
in the band initially, but Adam Dicker is the drummer on that CD.
And that's available on iTunes
That's
as
on
well?
iTunes as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great musicians. Heard that a few times.
That's more traditional,
Yeah.
sort of organ trio based, Jimmy Smith
Yeah.
based stuff.
Wes Montgomery.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So what are you doing at the moment, gig-wise or creative-wise, writing-wise?
I am at the moment sort of more or less working on writing more fusion
Yep.
style material. It's kind of a slow process. Not for Dirt, but for another trio I'd like to start
Yep.
getting work for in the future. Doing a lot of cover work at the moment,
Yeah.
with bands like Lucifer's Lounge,
Yeah.
the odd gig with yourself.
Yeah.
If we do some duo work. And every so often I get called for, well, what you'd call fill-in work, where people can't do a gig and they need a guitar player.
A wedding or whatever.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Or I've often filled in for James at the Gilbert in the city, which is a regular jazz gig in Adelaide. And so yeah, that's the sort of stuff I'm working on. And practicing, obviously, as much as I can.
Yeah.
It's always
Cool.
good to...
Well, we'll talk a bit more about perhaps practice and improvisation after we improvise some jazz.
Oh.
So I think we're going to do a bossa, is that right?
Latin. Jazz is considered covers Latin music, I guess. So,
all right.
yeah.
So you want to count in, or
Yeah, sure.
can you do that? Okay. I reckon you can. Go on.
2, 1, 2, 3. Glad we finished.
Yeah. Yeah, that was Blue Bossa.
Blue Bossa.
Blue Bossa. I'm sure a lot of people have played that before or heard it before. We've certainly played it a few times in our lives.
Yeah, we have.
So what we want to talk about next, Dave, is improvising, which is pretty much what we both just did.
Yeah.
You obviously played the head and the solo. What is improvisation?
I suppose you could define it as making up, in a simple way, the short answer is making up melodies spontaneously, or chords, but generally it's making up melodies on the spot. And that's generally done from patterns and scales, arpeggios, licks, I guess you could say, that you've internalized over time that suit the chord sequence that you're playing over.
Yeah. Yeah. So how would you how would you define successful improvising? I mean, it's perhaps not successful, but engaging improvising. Sometimes we hear someone improvise and we think, that's terrific. That's how I would like to play, or that's what appeals to my ears. And sometimes we'll hear someone improvise and we think, nah, that's not working for me. What do you think the difference is?
I guess successful means generally playing melodies that you would consider fit the chord changes that you're playing.
Yeah.
If you hear, there are right and wrong notes, I guess, of playing over chord progressions, and when you hear someone doing it well, it's almost an instinct that you get that they're doing it properly, that they're playing within the proper structure, and they're making up melodies that are truly original and have been done spontaneously and not to a formula, I guess you could say, but they're quite inspirational to hear someone playing really well in an instantaneous, spontaneous setting, like playing over a set of chord sequences, like in a jazz tune.
Perhaps, they're speaking to you.
In a way, yeah. I mean, it's not just over jazz either. A lot of great rock players improvise as well. And people like who I got into, I guess, early on in terms of improvising, in the rock sense, were people like Eric Clapton, great improvisers. Yeah. Not jazz players, obviously. Richie Blackmore I got into a lot as a guy who started to delve into opening my ears to things like harmonic minor scales and that sort of type of link between chords and melodies.
Yeah. So how do you practice today, or do you practice, and what do you practice, and can you recommend any sort of practicing tips to people out there?
I suppose once you get into improvisation, the one thing I sort of do consistently and have always done is to practice over chord changes, but that is sometimes easier said than done. And the one thing I found that really helped was playing over, strangely enough, one chord at a time. When you get a chord progression in a jazz tune that seems to be very overwhelming, where a lot of chords are flying by, it becomes quite tricky to understand and quickly move from one chord to another. So I practiced a lot jamming on my own to one chord at a time, and then two chords put together, then three, and that gradually I compressed that time that I would practice those. Yeah,
like the 2-5-1, I guess, is perhaps the most commonly used progression.
Yeah, it is. So I would practice on the 2 a lot, like as a Dorian scale, and then over the 5, then the 1, and then put them all together. Yeah, it's kind of like building blocks, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and that's definitely a great way to start learning how to play jazz. I think it's because the 2-5-1 is, as I said, the most commonly played.
It's the most common
progression in most jazz standards.
Yeah,
so absolutely. To be able to nail that is a good start. So are there any sort of scales or arpeggios that you tend to focus on or use more than others?
I remember learning the major scale was the one that I discovered or had the epiphany, I guess, that everything else in terms of scales and arpeggios, etc., stemmed from the major scale. The pentatonic scale comes from the major. I didn't know this early on, but it's something you learn as you study jazz and harmony, is that everything comes from the major scale. To me, that's how I understand it. People learn differently, but I understood it that way. And so I focused a lot on learning the major scale, kind of all over the neck. And that led to modes and that sort of thing. Yeah. I could somehow see that most scales stemmed, for me, from the major scale. So once I learnt that, everything else made sense when I went further to learn other scales, like melodic minor, which I saw as just an extension or a slight alteration of the major scale. So I suppose that one was the groundbreaker for me.
Yeah, I had a similar conversation about 3 weeks ago with the young lad from Florida, and he said it was all about the major scale.
Yeah.
Again, so it's a common answer, and it's a good one for anybody who's interested. Dave, what's the best way to practice improvising? I mean, to me, the obvious answer is just to do it. But are there any other? Obviously find somebody to play with. What about things like Band in a Box or Jamie Aebersold or the iReal book, the new digital one?
Playing along with backing tapes is a great way to backing tapes. That's an old term. Shows how old we are.
Backing cassette.
Cassette. Yeah, that's a great way to learn to play. I found doing a lot of transcribing.
Okay.
I really did do a real...
Which is ripping off other people's solos.
Essentially working out other people's lines. It gives you shapes and patterns and ideas and that you then apply to your instrument or you can see on your instrument. Guitar being very visual for me, I see patterns and shapes on the fretboard. So that's one thing that was huge for me, and I still do it. It's one of the things that after 30-odd years of playing, that I still do because it's so helpful.
And you still get inspired every time you sit down to play? You still, is it the same sort of feeling you had the first time?
Oh, I still love to play.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I don't think I'll ever stop doing.
Yeah.
I still get inspired by hearing people play, hearing new people play, hearing new albums by people that get recommended to me. Or
do you still listen to a lot of jazz?
I listen to a lot of music generally, I guess, but jazz being one of those. But yeah, I do. It's generally through friends and associates and other musicians that I get to. You should listen to this guy and listen to that guy, and you go out and listen to it, or they give you copies of the CDs or the music, and it just opens up your ears to other possibilities, and that inspires you to go home and work on it and play. And you'll often hear something that you've never heard before. Humans being pretty inventive creatures, they come up with things, and it opens up a whole new area for you.
And so you like lots of styles of music. You're not just a jazz head.
No.
You're a rock fan.
I am, absolutely. I started listening to that music. I still love it, and that opens up new sounds for me more than harmony and stuff. It opens up new. Yeah,
and it all applies to. I mean, every style of music to me applies in every other style of music.
They're all sort of linked in their own way, so there's nothing separate from everything else. Putting
a name on it boxes it a little bit, doesn't it? Like jazz. Jazz doesn't have to be, for a lot of people, jazz means discordant, which to me is totally not true.
No.
We were talking about that earlier.
It can mean discordant, but it often isn't. It's all very much within what we call an inside sound. It's not just... that can be a thing of great beauty too. Can be.
I mean, you listen to Ella Fitzgerald sing, or any of those greats, or someone like Kurt Elling nowadays, just magnificent stuff. A mixture of beauty and discordant. So jazz, I guess, means a lot of freedom, I think, more than a lot of other styles of music. I think it's time for questions with Ben. Hi, Ben.
We have a question from Fretmath, who asks, moving from a classical guitar background to jazz, any suggestions on basic practice routines that might be useful?
Classical being a very written and not preconceived, is that the word?
Yeah,
very composed music. Jazz is obviously, for me, I'd define it as improvising music. I would begin to start to transcribe. Like I said before, transcription was the thing that opened up ideas for me, and that led to learning scales, and I discovered what I was playing in terms of the lines I'd learnt was from scales. So one thing almost leads to another. So I would start to transcribe as much as I can.
People like Wes Montgomery?
Absolutely.
Joe Pass?
Yeah, Joe Pass was one I got into a lot, and I learnt a lot from listening to him play solo jazz guitar. In fact, one of the first blues pieces I learnt as a solo player was from an album called Virtuoso by Joe Pass, where he plays jazz standards on his own as a solo guitarist. And I killed that album. I thrashed the living daylights out of it, and learnt particularly a blues progression solo he played on that album. I learnt it note for note, and that really opened up what was possible and what harmony you could understand. I suppose I was just internalizing it.
Yeah.
Listening to as much jazz as possible just really helps you understand. Because a lot of people say they don't understand jazz.
Yeah.
They don't quite get what it means. There's a lot going on in terms of the harmony, and I found absolutely listening almost as much as I'd practice. I would listen.
Yeah.
Was a real help.
Sarah has asked through LinkedIn, what makes jazz unique to other styles?
I suppose the improvisation aspect of it. There's very little other music that has as much improvisation as jazz. Rock has some to some degree, but it's very restricted, I guess you could say. Blues is closer to jazz, but I would define jazz as being the one music that has is defined by the amount of improvisation and as improvising music.
Freedom as well.
Well, freedom to create spontaneous music. I suppose most other music is composed.
Yeah.
It's written, it's fixed in the way it comes out, whereas jazz is made up on the spot.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's, you're following a group of chords.
There's a basic structure involved.
Yeah, but then jazz can also be
completely free.
Quite a lot of jazz musicians, they get together and they just make it up as they go. The bass player might start with a groove and off they go. The drummer will join in and the guitarist starts playing. They can all hear harmonically what's happening.
And they react to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
When you hear the line from the bass player, if he happens to start a groove, you pick up on what he's playing and you kind of add your own touch to it.
That can be really exciting for a musician. Unfortunately, perhaps not quite as exciting for a lot of listeners. That's perhaps the difference. It can be indulgent, and I don't mean that in a negative way.
It's quite a scary proposition too, because you don't really know if what you're doing is working, but you have a lot of fun trying.
That's it.
It really can bring some great moments.
Yeah, and that is there another one, Ben?
Manolis has asked, how did you guys come up with the name Spank You Very Much?
Well, it wasn't our name. I have no idea how that one came about.
Me neither.
It was, I think, in the early 90s, and I think Ivan had something to do with the title. I think it's a play on Thank You Very Much, and goodness knows why. But yeah, the band had a bit of success.
To me, that sounds like an Ian Mitchell line.
Could be an Ian Mitchell.
Ian was the singer of the band, and he had quite a basis in English humour, and that sounds like a play on words.
He's a funny boy. But yeah, where it comes from, who knows? But I like it. I like it. Okay. Well, that just about wraps up the show for this week. Next week, our guest will be Sam Tritico from Florida, back to Florida again. And we'll be talking about the Nashville number system with him. So make sure you tune in for that one, same time, same place. And don't forget you can continue this conversation on the blog and the comments section, and look out for Dave's links and where you can get hold of the CDs that he has produced. So thanks very much for watching. We'll see you again next week, and let's play a bit more, Dave.
Yeah.
Shall we play a blues?
Blues.
Jazz blues even.
Where you go?
1, 2, 3, 4.